Welcome to this session on Look East, Aspirations and Fractured Hopes. I've been given the unique opportunity to both moderate and also be participating as a panelist this afternoon. So I'm privileged to be here with Mmhonlumo and Hoihnu. I think we all come from different backgrounds, even though we have some commonalities which we will discuss a little later. But I trust that this session will be an interesting one, and without going so much into what this will be, as the conversation will lead us into, I want to thank all of you and also the organizing committee of JLF for this session. I think this session will largely be centering around those 2-3 words that you have already seen mentioned in the program. Of course, this is going to be on largely the Northeast, the topics around that, but mainly focusing on these 2 words, or phrase, aspirations and fractured hopes. But at the same time, we will hope to help this audience engage with the general aspects of the developments in the Northeast, and also how the region is often perceived, and how the region also likewise perceives not just the rest of the country, but also the rest of the world, and how we can look at it. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to start with, and I think as the introduction led us know a little bit about Hoihnu. Maybe I can start with you by asking about, you've been writing about a lot of things, not just journalistic adventures, but because this is a post-lunch session, perhaps we could start talking about the cuisines. You've done a cookbook on the Northeast. Maybe that could be a starting point for us to talk about how and what made you write and pick up something of that sort. Could you throw out your lights?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this session and also the stage and the space. I started off writing, why of all the things, food, and a book that talks about food, because the first sight or the first thing that we take away from any culture is the food. It's also something that binds us. It's also something which is so deep. Margaret Mead, that as sociologists had said, the practice of food is something, it's a gift that we give to the next generation. So, for instance, in the Northeast, a lot of our culture, we belong to an oral culture. So a lot of what we have inherited today is really something that our grandparents, our father, they have, it's been transmitted or transferred orally. We have no written documents. So therefore, I thought very early on in my career that if I don't do it, a lot of what we cook, a lot of what we have, a lot of things that we do are just, I had to go to people's home to understand, to see, document, and see it for myself to be able to write. And I hope that in doing so, I'm able to document a very, very important part of what makes us what we are and what defines us, and also to sort of clear a lot of myth on why do people in the Northeast eat what they eat. So I hope that sort of answers your question. Food to me is very, very important. It's a soft subject, but at the same time, it's a great binding factor. It's the first thing that gives you an insight to any culture across the world.
Yeah, that's true. I think food is very important for all of us, I'm sure. All of us, you'll agree with me. I'm sure many of you have tasted the cuisines of the Northeast, and you'll have lots of things to say about it. Now, let's maybe come back to the topic of our discussion, which is aspirations. I think in a way, if you will agree with me, both of you, this phrase, these words, aspirations and fractured hopes, somehow sums up a lot of what the Northeast is today. The fact that many of these young professionals, say, move to metros, not just Delhi, Mumbai, but let's say Jaipur and other parts of the growing cities around the country, also tells about a sense of aspirations, isn't it? All of us were that once when we were younger as students. At the same time, it also tells about the lack of opportunities in the region. Would you like to agree with me or share some thoughts on that, Mon? Would you like, maybe you can start, and Hoihnu also can jump in to share a little bit about that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Like I was joking with him in the morning, that I'm here to disagree with both of you on anything and everything. I'll start with a little bit of historical context, because those of you who knows the northeastern region, of course, the very fact that it's called Northeast also denotes a lot of things. It has many meanings, but I will not go into that. One of my friend here who is in the front will tell us. He served there in the army in the region for a long time, and I'm very happy to see you actually. The very fact that the Northeast is perceived from a place like Delhi or North India as far is indicative of the fact that it's not really central to your thoughts. And when it's not central to your thoughts, not central to any planning process, any notions or visions of inclusion. So anybody who goes to Northeast, I tell them that you're going to fly over Bangladesh airspace to reach my region. So geographically, it's something which is not really appreciated, the fact that it shares 5 international boundaries. And when you have the tension of international boundaries, you have issues which you don't foresee. So the region itself is geographically spatially located. Then the other aspect of the region, I'll just give you 2-3 stories, because, I mean, pontificating on the region, telling you details is something which you can easily Google these days. I'll give you an example. In 1962, when the Chinese came till Tezpur, it was, and is still known as Indo-China War. There are a lot of books on that. The Northeast region experienced something which we have never experienced as a country. And there were so many narratives around that time where, remnants of which still evokes very strong emotions. For instance, for me, I heard stories about, because those days, there were very few people from Northeast stationed or working in Delhi, or even studying in Delhi. Maybe, up to 300-400. But because of the war, a lot of people were given the misnomer or the name Chinky. So it's something which states that you are different. But again, the frustration of the people as a country, maybe Delhi, because it is again different, it has had the Sikh riots, its response to any issue has been sometimes violent, sometimes different. So that's part of an history, but that sense actually alienated a lot of our leaders who were studying in Delhi, because Delhi happened to be the favorite destination for students. Now, the other story I want to tell you is, fast forward to 2010. A friend of mine from Manipur was working in Ghana, and he encountered, or he met 2 guys, one Chinese guy and one Sardar in Ghana. Both are businessmen. They entered into a partnership to sell automobiles. But, because the Sardar wanted somebody from India, Chinese wanted somebody from China. Obviously, they wanted somebody they could be comfortable with. So both of them finally decided they'll hire this Manipuri because he looks Chinese, but he is Indian. I'm telling you this story because these are illustrative of what happens on the ground level. Now, Hoihnu talked about food. When I was studying in Delhi University, I went to meet a friend of mine who was taking a room for rent in a place called Motibak in South Delhi. So one day we went, and my friend is a little plumpy, and when he laughs from the diaphragm. He just comes out with the laughter from the diaphragm. So it comes out very loud. So that day we had good, delicious meal, and for us, pork is our national food. So we had that, and we were cracking some jokes, but it was a very small, cramped building. So the laughter from the ground floor where he was staying could be heard equally loudly from the top floor where the house owner was staying. So after the laugh in the evening, he was kicked out of the flat. So he had an experience that, these are issues which we used to deal with. And we thought that this will never end. Cultural differences will remain. The very dictum unity in diversity is being challenged at every local micro level. So how do you overcome that? Now, the other aspect which we don't really look at is that there are several ideas of India. My idea of India may be different from your idea of India. But there is one India. So I was thinking that what are the steps to be taken? For instance, on the development front, Northeast is always looked as backward. It is looked as, underdeveloped. There's so many affirmative action programs, even government policy, you will have in the constitution itself the 6th schedule, which covers 4 states. These are affirmative action policies which exist constitutionally. But I'll tell you something, these democratic institutions that are in place are not in tandem or correspondence with the democratic processes that are in place. So a lot of friction, a lot of conflict that exists there is because the idea of India has not been discussed as thoroughly, as large spread as it should be. In conclusion to this discussion, I like to say that, when we talk about development, when we talk about looking towards east, there is a joke that I shared with a few of my friends. There was a friend of mine whose son, he's from Rajasthan, by the way, whose son studied in the US filmmaking. So he became a very prominent filmmaker, and he came one day to Delhi, and his father invited me. We had a cup of coffee and we were discussing. Suddenly there was this discussion of, because Northeast has so many insurgent groups, there was a discussion of what is the idea of India, who is a nationalist, who is anti-nationalist. So out of frustration, because I could not give a credible and proper response, I asked him this question. My friend, you went to US, have you been to Northeast? No. If you have not been to Northeast, my contention is that you are anti-national.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a conversation only. But I feel that at one point of time, as a young political leader, I used to come and meet a lot of leaders here. And this is a long time back. I met a leader who's a minister from Maharashtra. And I was inviting him to Northeast. I met him for some work. And so he was asking me, Acha, so where is Kohima? Where is, it's near Guwahati, na? Then I said, Guwahati is in Assam. Acha, Assam. Orissa ka samne, Orissa ka paas mein hai na? I was like, okay, geography is not his strongest point. But I would like to say that, understanding geography, understanding demographics is the first step towards integration. As a young student, school student, I was part of the NCC. So we used to go to a lot of integration games. Some people come from Haryana, some people come from Punjab, some people come from South India. So it was for us as young students a cultural explosion. We've not been used to, getting gullies in the NCC parade when we make mistakes. And gully means I'll really take offense as a Naga. Arey, how can you scold me for no reason? I didn't know that it was part of the drill. Yeah. So all these experiences makes us realize that it's not just the duty of the powers that be, it's not the duty of the institutions that exist, but who invigorates and pushes the processes that will enable us to become a great nation.
Yeah.
And why I say this is because, you see, I was very offended in 2013 by one fact. 2014, early 2014. I'm from Nagaland, so there was this Lok Sabha election campaign being held, and the Prime Minister of the country came. That time Manmohan Singh came. He was Prime Minister for 10 years. As Prime Minister, he was coming to Nagaland for the first time, that also for election campaign. So it offended me. So if I'm offended, will someone from Delhi be offended that I am offended that the Prime Minister came only after 10 years? So the counter questions that we ask are different from the narrative that is laid before us. So there are a lot of things which are, a lot of intricacies, a lot of nuances which are sometimes missed out because our narrative is the narrative we want all the time. But for us to be a strong country, we have to identify, I just narrated or mentioned the borders that Northeast share. Of course, it is at the margins. Of course, we have now changed the Look East policy to Act East policy. Of course, it is our window to Southeast Asia. Of course, it is the land link to Southeast Asia. Of course, this region is as important as any other region. As our Prime Minister said, and I'll stop at that, India can only become a superpower if the Northeast develops along with it. I will give you more examples of that later, but for now I'll stop at this.
Thank you, yeah. I realize it's going to be quite difficult to stop a politician. You'll have to excuse me if I bump in next time. But yeah, I mean, let's hear from, other perspective. Let's say, Hoihnu, you've been a journalist for a long time, as long as I remember, at least the last 20 years or so. You've covered so many aspects, particularly the aspects of the Northeast, and we've seen the how even in the last recent times you've covered a lot of aspects, starting out different ventures, starting Northeast Odyssey, COVID Tales, and the kind of narratives that you're trying to bring to the limelight. What are your observations about what kind of hopes can we look forward to? Is it really fractured all the time, or is it something else that lies beyond it?
The very topic of discussion, there is aspiration and there is fractured. So the aspirations that we have in the Northeast are manifold. One, if I have to realistically put it under different heads, we have educational aspirations. There are 8 states in the region, the 8 universities. If you look at Maharashtra, which is one of the largest states, it has 1 central university, about 20 state universities, and about 20 deemed universities. So if you look at that, you understand the disparity, and you also understand how inaccessible education is, so therefore it becomes one of our biggest aspirations. In terms of infrastructural aspirations, we are so badly connected, we are landlocked. It's just the other day that, for instance, a direct flight started to Itanagar, the capital of Arunachal, which is a very, very important border state. Now, my home state, Manipur, which is under boil right now, is going to have a rail link. For the first time ever, it has been laid. So you question and you reflect and say, this is supposed to be a very important border state, but how is it that it is allowed to just be the way it is? Even getting there, I remember when I was a student, I mean, another story why all of us ended up studying in the University of Delhi is also because our state failed us in terms of giving us the peace that it should have. Three of us, we hail from one of the most disturbed states in India. They come from Nagaland, which is home to the NSCN, which is always called as the mother of all insurgencies. And I come from Manipur, which is on the boil right now, which has far too many fractions of secessionist movement. So we were all sent out. The fact that we came out, it's not because we wanted to. Nobody wants to leave home for, unless and until you're doing some very specialized master's course somewhere. We all had to come out because it wasn't a viable situation for us to continue. Therefore, the aspirations is very much also in education, in infrastructural, even in terms of medical aspirations. If you look at AIIMS, the hospital in Delhi, it has far exceeded the carrying capacity because a lot of people come from different parts of the states. Why is it the states don't have a premier medical institute? That's another question, but particularly for the Northeast states, a lot of our patients, even for something, an ailment as simple as maybe diabetes or a kidney or something, they all of them come to Delhi. Just imagine the kind of inconvenience one has to take. So therefore, I say that the aspirations that we have are on this: education, healthcare, infrastructure, and also in terms of political aspirations. The regional parties that we have in the Northeast must also have the same legitimacy and the same standing as a lot of other regional parties that are in different parts of the country. And of course, a very, very pet subject of mine, the one-size-fits-all policy of the India government would not really work, because a lot of times, for instance, if you look at the ongoing violence in Manipur, I would fail miserably as a citizen or as a resident of Manipur if I don't bring up this topic. It's been burning today for the 274th day, and we allowed that to happen. When Gujarat happened, in 2 days, it was brought down. So I questioned aloud, why is it allowed to happen? Is it because it is too far away from our mental space? Is it too disconnected? Therefore, the questions that we ask are really valid. And when we say there is a grouse, there is indeed a grouse. So the policies that even the center adopts has to be nuanced, has to be sort of tailor-made, because we all come from the diversity that we have, the landlocked geographical area and also the border state. There's so many things that are beyond the understanding of a lot of people. What you all take for granted, going to school, having 24 energy is not something that we can take it for granted. A few years ago, a very bright bureaucrat from Manipur, Armstrong Pame, he crowdfunded to build a 100-kilometer road because he could not bear to see students walking for kilometers, patients being carried on bamboo stretch. Imagine that is the story that we're living in. And when we say we have a grouse, there is indeed something. So the way how we look at Northeast will also have to change. We have to look at it with more empathy. We have to look at it with a greater sense of sensitivity. This could go on, so I rest it here.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I agree with many of what you said. In fact, I think when we look around, for us today, I mean, living in 2024, I'm sure many of these perspectives have changed, and also, agreeably in a better sense. The fact that we could actually talk about this even in a fest like this is also an opportunity for us to see where the gaps are, and also perhaps take deliberate actions to see the region, not just in the joking sense of what Mon was referring to his friend as being called an anti-nationalist, but yes, we really do not really know so much about our region. Perhaps that's the reason why we have so much of stereotyping even today. But because this session also has to go on to let the audience allow asking a couple of questions before I close, let me just quickly go to one thing which is, as I mentioned earlier, was common to us. All of us studied in Delhi University. And, for interesting reason, both of you, your first books were books of poetry. And Mohan studied in the English department, and, Hoihnu in IP College, Political Science. And I also, of course, studied in DU. How was your experience? Because this is a literary fest, perhaps we can also talk about our own book writing experience. How does writing help you, understand not just about yourself, but what are the subjects that you write about? Would you briefly tell us, because we'll have to also throw open the floor for questions. Quickly, maybe in one minute each.
Okay. So, out of the 3 books of poetry I have written, the third one is called Slingstones. And the idea was, whenever I go, because people look at you differently, people ask you, first question they'll ask you is, where are you from? And it's natural. But then when you go deeper into the conversation, then it goes into the history, the region, and all that. So a lot of people want to ask. And it's difficult for all of us to keep, repeating the same thing. So I thought that since I write poetry, I should write a book of poems about my identity, about the colonial period, about our history, about the problems we had in the past, and also about the prospects. So today, if I were to ask, what's Naga? I would simply, I thought, hand over that book and say, okay, have a read, and then we can discuss. So it was as simple as that, but it allowed me and enabled me to explore even not just, the philosophy of headhunting, the whole challenge to the idea of India by somebody like Pizzo, or, our food culture even. So all those aspects are captured in that. And I felt that that was one area where I should delve into, because I'm constantly thinking about that.
Yeah. Mohan will be talking more about his book day after tomorrow, so please be there. And Hoihnu, would you like to share?
Okay, I started writing poems, and those were, when I was sent away from home in hostels, those were really about my home, how I missed it. And the other book called The Northeast Cookbook is really, as I said earlier, it is really explaining what we eat, why we eat what we eat. And then another venture, which I miss answering in the other, this thing, is called The Northeast Stories. My idea of nation building, or my idea of integrating the Northeast with the rest of India, is building an audience which is larger than the Northeast themselves. For instance, I believe we will be able to succeed in nation building and integration when we, sitting here, read a story, a very encouraging story about a Northeastern doing something unusual in that odd situation, which a mainstream media will not necessarily pick it up. So I started this venture in 2010 called the Northeast Stories, believing that we have wonderful stories, a wealth of stories about people. And when I say people, even we have a lot of entrepreneurs, but the entrepreneurship in the Northeast is very different from what we understand. It's not something that was born out of an excess. It was rather born out of the need to do something. It was born out of an idea to solve a problem. So therefore, I started documenting stories of all these people, believing that they need to be read outside of the region. And that, to me, is a very important exercise of nation building. And I continue to do that, hoping that we would be better understood through our stories. We would be better understood through the people that we are, through the engagement of different things that we do, and really to take our stories outside the boundary and to the rest of India.
Thank you. I think, of course, we would love to talk more about these things, but because of the sake of time, we'll have to just move on and take a couple of questions from the audience. Yeah, you have the mics? You would like to pass it on? Yeah. I think we'll just take them together so that we can respond quickly. Yeah. First, okay, yeah, and then...
Sir, my question to the panel is that since the northeastern states of India have been subjected to so much neglect, are they not more vulnerable to Chinese aggression in future? You know, China is already fighting for Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, and when our infrastructure is so poor, then the enemy will take advantage.
Hello, all of you. I actually spent 4 years in the Northeast, and unlike the three of you, I went to the Northeast to study in a university, and I have a lot of fond memories from there. I think one of the points that you mentioned about the expectations of the people who hail from the Northeast and the kind of expectations they have from the central government of India, I wanted to know from you, what role do you think private citizens, people who have succeeded, people like all of you who have succeeded, who come from there, in other parts of the world, what role do they have in participating in meeting and addressing some of the aspirations, and how that story can be replicated and become a movement for change?
Thank you. Can we have another question backside? I saw another hand. Yeah. Okay, there's one and one behind. Hoihnu, can you take that second
Yeah.
one? Okay, wait. Let's you take the first.
My question is that do you think that the neglect of Northeast is also a result of, lot less representation in the Lok Sabha? So for example, the delimitation process is coming up in 2026. So would the Northeastern states together want more representation in the parliament?
Okay. One more. There's one behind. Yeah, so, yeah, meanwhile you can ask. I saw a hand behind.
So unfortunately, this othering in different narrative, we are seeing different versions of it all across the country based on one's religion, region, North Indian, South Indian, etc. And Manipur being a state where now we saw communal violence. How do you think this othering of the North Indian states is more pronounced than the kind of othering that other citizens witness who are in the so-called mainstream regions?
Thank you. Can I have one more?
Right. So you mentioned about students of Northeast pursuing education in Delhi. I'm pursuing my master's in JNU, and there has been a proposal there to build an hostel that's exclusively meant for Northeastern students. Now, on one hand, I think that's a good move. I think it's a safe space for all the Northeastern community. But again, there are a lot of problems, right? Because one, Northeastern, as we say, it's not a homogeneous community at large, right? And secondly, people say that that's antithetical to the notion of inclusion at large. So I want to know what is your take on that?
Before our time runs out, I think we should just quickly respond.
I will just take your questions and combine with
Can
that.
you bring it closer?
Yeah. A lot of people who have gone out to study have also gone back to change a lot of things. They've gone back to redefine things in business, in private sectors. So they are quite a handful of them, but playing an extremely important role. So I'm happy that they're able to sort of bridge the gap in whatever capacity they are. And in terms of the hostel, yes, I understand when we come out from the region, we ought to integrate, we ought to mix, but sometimes we are back into that because it has to be a Northeastern. So it has to be done very sensitively. Again, as I said, it has to be looked into with a purposeful, exercise. I understand that when we come out, we are not just going to be ghetto, in a ghetto to say that it is a hostel only for the Northeasterns. So there is where we need a very, very well thought out strategy, not just to build a structure where they all come back and not take back anything. The idea is to come out, integrate, exercise, and go back with a larger perspective of your own definition of India, your own definition of what you're taking back when you're coming out to study in a premier institute. So I think that is something
thanks. The clock is ticking, so quickly, Mon.
I just want to add to her that there is a already Northeast Women Hostel in Delhi University where the students are not just from Northeast. The only difference is that funding came from the donor ministry, which is specific to the Northeastern region. Number one. Number two, the question of neglect that you asked. I agree. In the past, if you look at it, I mean, I mentioned the 1962 war, where the powers that be had totally surrendered. Our Prime Minister that time was Nehru. He said, my heart goes out to the people of Northeast. So the Northeastern region, because Chinese PLA came till Tezpur, anyone's been to Assam will know, fell betrayed. And this sentiment exists till now. But in terms of development, I'll tell you one thing. When in 2010 I went to Arunachal Pradesh by road, there was no road in a place called Pasigat. The town was small and all that. But now if you go, it's not just the highway. It's not just big roads. From 0 airports in Arunachal, you have 9 airports. I'm shocked. I'm surprised at the pace of infrastructure development that has been placed there. And roads is one of the main thing where, because the road to development starts with the development of roads. So in the Northeastern region, in the past 10 years, the amount of investment in infrastructure has been immense. You would not imagine in my adult life, I never expected to see a 4-lane from Dimapur to Kohima where I stay. Now we have. It is like a miracle for people like me. In my constituency, from village to village, when I went with the Jal Jeevan Mission program, I'll tell you just examples. This impacts everybody. It is yet to impact the entire place, but the programs have already started. One 80-year-old lady once told me during my campaign that please don't come to my house for campaigning. If you want to campaign, please put tap water connection in my kitchen. Next 5 years I went, there was tap water connection in her kitchen. I could wash my hands. She was gladly showing me that. So the problems of politics there also, especially electoral politics, is about how representatives can deliver. It's not about the number of representation alone. Because in the country itself, you know how delimitation happens. It's based on population criteria. But if you take that argument to Arunachal, they'll say, okay, new census. They have only 13 lakhs. Nagaland has 22 lakhs. They have 2 Lok Sabha seats. Nagaland has only 1 Lok Sabha seat. But try convincing an Arunachali that you don't need 2, you need only 1 MP. They will tell you. They are the largest land mass geographically as a state in the northeastern region. So in terms of the land itself, they deserve not 2 but 4. So this argument will go on and on. But certain criteria have to be combined based on not just population but based on distance. For instance, in 2004, in a cornermost part of Arunachal bordering China, the villagers decided, when Chidambaram was home minister, he went there. The villagers decided that if you don't give us rice, from tomorrow we are shifting to China. So he had to send rice by chopper. But today, cornermost part of Arunachal, if you go, I have gone myself, you will find blacktop roads. Forget blacktop roads. I mean, no one would have imagined 10 years ago that some Lamborghini can come and drive in Pasigat. I mean, sports cars are coming. It's no indicator of development, but I'm just saying that the pace of development, we have IITs, we have IIMs, we have AIMS in the Northeast now. So from 0, we have gone to 10. So, I mean, the challenge is to ensure that development reaches every intended beneficiary, and that actually has already started. So, years of neglect in the past has been replaced by a surfeit of engagement in terms of development. Last example I'll tell you. Notice, if you know about the history of Assam, you would see that tea, oil has been extracted from this region. It has benefited the central pool of resources. But what has it benefited? When our present Prime Minister was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he filed a case in the High Court that revenue sharing, especially in terms of oil and petroleum, natural gas, should be, there should be equity in revenue sharing. And he won the case. After that, there was windfall in Assam. So both internal revenue and central share is now coming on time and judiciously so that there is focused development of this region. But all that development, we realize, can only benefit the people when the community comes forward to accept and also to participate in that. I will just generalize and conclude with that.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. I think there are lots to say about the Northeast and also what is happening. There are good things happening. There are also, of course, unfortunate things continues to happen. There are also lots of things which we can engage with. And I think this is just a stepping stone for us. Those of us who have not been to the Northeast should also go there and then visit and find out for yourself how things are. For those of us, I think, like us, like Hoihnu and me, we are mostly based in the NCT, and many times it is difficult for us to go back. We have lots of responsibilities. At the same time, of course, Northeast is also just another place where corruption is also quite visible. And unfortunately, corruption is also allowed to happen, unfortunately, I must say it, because there are, government often closes eyes to it. Of course, Mohan will say a little different thing because he's currently speaking for one party. But I think development certainly is there. And I think that's what we need to pick it up. And as we step on from here, I think we should hope for the best, not for a fractured hopes, but also with good intentions so that we can hope where everybody can participate, take along, and look for greater success in the days to come. I think because of time, we'll have to just wrap up. You want to quickly say
just
something?
one line I want to counter you. I think it would be dangerous if we think that all these decades of negligence would be met up with rampant pumping in of money, because then it would be mindless. And I fear we will run the risk of losing all that makes us special, all that makes us what we are with that. We will run a risk if we mindlessly do that. If our airports, our ports become a control in the hands of just one enterprise, I fear, my friend, we run the risk of losing what we are.
I think I didn't mean that, but I was just giving you statistics of what development has taken place in contrast with what has not taken place in the past 50 years. But today, development is the war cry of the citizens of that region as well. So I think responding to development needs of the region is one aspect which I highlighted. At the same time, I also mentioned about how democratic institutions are in place, but how we need to strengthen the democratic processes.
True.
So, I mean, it's not disagreeing with you. Just
So I
stating
think
the fact.
that's true. That's true. I think with that note, we will end.